I'm back. Hi everyone, Jen Turnham here. I have a psychology degree and I'm passionate about using brain science and psychology-based personal development tools to help women fill their own cup first in order to be better mothers, sisters, friends, partners, whatever our goal is. I'm also the host of a free Facebook group called Highly Sensitive Extroverts with Jen T. So if you are what they call a HSP or highly sensitive person, and you're also an extrovert, you are truly a unique human being, just like me. I say that every week, but I'm proud of being unique now that I've finally discovered this. So highly sensitive people who are also extroverts actually make up only about 6% of the population. We have different struggles and different challenges, and that's why I created the HSE group to help. I also wanted to draw your attention to a free guide I created, which is Feel Fantastic in 3 Simple Steps. There's a link in the post attached to this video to download that guide. There's also a link to join the group. So suggestion that why don't you do both now? Now today's topic is about, or written for, control freaks. You know you're out there. I used to be one, so I can totally relate. So I'm going to talk to you about what we call your sphere of control, or in simple terms, controlling the things you can control. So a situation I'm going to see if you can relate. Have you ever wished that you could, or you've even actually tried to control someone else, their behaviour, their choices, whatever it might be? If you can relate, please type guilty in the comments, whether you're watching this live, which I don't think anyone's on at the moment, but if you're watching the replay and you can relate, please type guilty or something similar, just so that I know that I'm delivering topics that are of interest to people. So if you can relate, trying to control somebody else, I think we've probably all been there, all done that. Now, in the terms of thinking about this concept of control, I think there's probably 2 main scenarios that I wanted to highlight. One is when we try to control what others think about us. And I'll give you an example from my life. When I was younger, I didn't have the best of times. And I remember, I think it was around the age of probably 18 to 20, 21 maybe, I stumbled across some quite hurtful but untrue rumours that were being spread about me. And when I first heard them, obviously it was very upsetting and I was really hurt by just thinking that these things were actually being said about me, because they were not nice, they were quite nasty. It was a really tough time. However, it was a really powerful learning experience as well, because what I learned is that no matter what I said or what I did, people were going to think what they wanted to think. So if they wanted to believe the rumours, they would see my explanation or my denial as proof that they were true, and I was simply trying to cover it up. So it's pretty much a no-win situation, because you try and defend yourself and they're still going to believe what they want to believe. So there's really no point. So I learned this the hard way, obviously, and it is really, really hard to not go into that self-defense and self-preservation mode and I had to work through a lot of hurt and a lot of anger. But I did get through it, and I learned that it was better to rise above these things and also to choose my friends a little more wisely, let go and move on. So it is possible. So that's the first scenario. Now, the second scenario in terms of trying to control others, I think comes when we try and control what others are doing or the choices they're making because we care about them. An example of this from my life is I dated a guy who was a drug addict. Big mistake, but in my defense, it didn't last long, and I didn't know he was an addict when we first met. I thought he just dabbled socially, which is what most of them say when you first start hanging out with them. And I tried to get him to stop by employing all sorts of different methods. But in the end, I realized that trying to control his choices, particularly when they were driven by addiction, was totally crazy, and it was making me crazy. So I ended the relationship because that was the only solution there was, really. So when we talk about trying to control other people, whether it be our kids, our brothers and sisters, our friends, our partners, whoever it might be, most of the time, all we end up achieving are two things. First of all, we tie ourselves up in knots and become a little cray-cray. And secondly, we drive a wedge into our relationship with that person. Now, the reason for all of this is explained by the concept I touched on before, and that's our sphere of control. Now, imagine yourself standing in the middle of two spheres or two circles. The smallest one around you is your sphere of control. Then there's a slightly larger sphere, which is your sphere of influence. Now, we're going to start talking about the sphere of control first. Now, interestingly, in life, there are actually only 4 things which we have complete control over. Any ideas what they might be? Just checking to see if anybody's on at the moment. No, I don't think they are. If you're watching the replay though, please take a guess and write your ideas in the comments. So what do you think are some of the 4 things that we can control in our life? Just pause so that people can write something down. All right, so the 4 things: our thoughts, our feelings, our words, and our actions. So I'll say that again: our thoughts, our feelings, our words, and our actions. No way, you say. Yes way. And here's some quick brain science. I won't go into this in too much detail, but there is a lot more in my premium personal development program, which is going to be released soon. So let's start with thoughts. I'm going to have to pause for a minute because I've got a frog stuck in my throat. Excuse me, just have a sip of my wine. Okay, so let's start with thoughts. With our thoughts, we can actually choose a different thought. Obviously, we need to be aware of what the thoughts are first before we can choose a different thought. Now, when it comes to our feelings, that's usually the one that people struggle with in terms of thinking we can control our feelings. Now, the reason we can is because feelings come from a chemical reaction in your brain. So different thoughts generate different chemical releases which equate to different feelings. So to give you an example of that, let's take the scenario of turning 40. Now that's something that happened to me last year. So turning 40, if coming up to turning 40, I was to start to think, or my thoughts that were going through my mind were, geez, 40 is over the hill. Those thoughts are going to generate feelings like I'm going to feel despondent or maybe even depressed. However, if we change that thought to life begins at 40, that thought is going to generate a different chemical to be released in our brain, and we're more likely to feel excited or optimistic. So as you can see, thoughts equal feelings. Now that's a very basic explanation, very simple explanation of the brain science behind it, but you get the idea. Now, another way of describing feelings are called emotions, obviously, but if you think of it as emotions, big capital E, or energy in motion in your body, and this energy can be very, very powerful, and it's actually what drives your behavior, just like the petrol in your car. So our words and our actions come from our feelings, and they're a flow-on effect from the emotions, which obviously come from our thoughts. So our thoughts generate the chemical reaction, which gives us our feelings, which then causes what we say and what we do. The key is, though, we can choose to say or do something different if we can intercept that process. Even though the process feels like it's quite automatic, and it does in fact happen within a split second, we can actually choose different words and different actions in situations. So just to recap, our sphere of control only contains 4 things: what we think, what we feel, what we say, and what we do. So what can we do instead, knowing that we like to try and control other people, but we also can't control other people? So when we're trying to either control what others think of us or what they are doing because we care about them, there are a couple of things we can do. Now, in terms of trying to control what others think about us, what I suggest you do is you resign yourself and you remind yourself of the fact that you cannot and will not ever be able to control what others think of you. This is really helpful when you're trying to stop people talking behind your back, judging you, or having an opinion about your life. If you can keep focusing on that fact, you cannot and you will not ever be able to control or even change what other people think about you. Keep focusing on that, and it will help you let things go. And also remember the famous saying, what others think of you is none of your business. There's a lot of wisdom in that quote. So just keep being you and find your tribe. So find people who love you for you. Now, when we're talking about the other scenario, when we're trying to control others because we care about them and we don't agree, or we think they're making bad choices in life, so instead of trying to control them, their behavior, their choices, which we now know is impossible, instead switch your focus on what you can do to influence them. So this is where the sphere of influence comes from. So as I mentioned earlier, this is larger than our sphere of control, but how do we influence? I can hear you asking. We can influence other people through our thoughts, our feelings, our words, and our actions. We can and we do influence people around us all the time. So I'm going to give you a very basic and very obvious example of how influence can work. So let's say you're trying to stop your teenager from smoking and drinking. Yet every day they see you chain smoking and drinking 5 beers after work. How do you think that influences them, their choices, and their behaviours? Now, I'm being quite extreme on purpose to demonstrate my point. And I'm not saying that you need to be perfect or that you have to quit smoking and quit drinking to stop your teenager from doing the same, although I would definitely recommend the quitting smoking part. I've done it. Best thing I ever did. Took me a lot of years, but I did. I'm simply demonstrating that in the most obvious way I can of how we do influence the people around us. So I've got a challenge for you. So now you know all about the sphere of control, the sphere of influence. I've got a challenge to put this into practice, basically. So part 1 of the challenge, write down the saying, what other people think about me is none of my business, and I will not tie myself up in knots trying to do the impossible and change what they think. So I'm going to say that again. Write down the saying, what other people think about me is none of my business, and I will not tie myself up in knots trying to do the impossible and change what they think. Now carry that little note everywhere you go, in your purse, in your mobile phone, jacket, whatever goes with you everywhere. And next time you notice yourself trying to control what somebody thinks about you, pull out the note and read it. Read it over and over and over again, as many times as is necessary for you to be able to let it go and move on. Part 2 of the challenge is have a think about the people in your life that you get frustrated with because you would like to be able to change something about them, something they're doing, their choices in life, their relationships, whatever it might be. Write down the people in your life that you're trying to change. So it could be your teenage kids, it could be a father who smokes, it could be a brother who drives you crazy, whoever it is. Next to each person's name, write down 3 things you could either say or do that might influence them in a helpful way. Now I stress the might because if it doesn't work, you need to let it go, and remember, you cannot control them. You can only try to influence them, but that doesn't always work in the way that we want it to. So all we can do is just keep doing what we're doing, and over time, our efforts might pay off. But again, they might not. But that is not in our control, remember. So that's the end of the challenge. So the 2-part challenge, write down the saying. Part 2 is think about the people in your life that you would like to try and control, and think of some things that you can do to influence them. Now, I'd love you to share in the group who's on your list. General terms are fine. We don't need people's names. You could just say brother-in-law, teenage kid, whatever, and what you are going to try. Please also share any experiences that you have regarding learning to stop trying to change what other people think of you. That's it for today. Thanks for watching this far. See you in the group or next week right here, same time, same place. This is Jen, over and out. Have a great week.